If somebody took me on a date and was like, here are physically printed out photos of my garden, I'd be like, hell
yeah.
yes. Let's do it.
And he was like talking about how beautiful like his rhododendrons had turned out and all this stuff. And I was like, see,
Hey,
this is sweet.
That's an accomplishment. Rhododendrons
They're
can
hard.
be fickle.
Yes, they can.
I gotta get that soil acidity right.
Books. 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 Books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that is dooming humanity through its own hubris.
Here we go, everyone. Who's ready?
I am your host, Grace Todd, writer, editor, book gremlin, and with me today, again, to continue our journey, is pal of the pod, Maddie Wood.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, baby.
Hi.
How you doing?
I don't know. I'm feeling very lucky because we've gotten to see each other like this is 3 times in like 10 days.
It's pretty magical.
It feels like such a luxury, like back when we used to live together.
Every time I turn around, you're just there at my elbow.
Oh, hello.
It's so exciting.
It's me. Remember me?
I mean, all I've ever wanted on a certain level is to just like put you in my pocket,
Well,
like physically.
I am a small statured human.
It's not even that. I just want to be able to carry you around with me conveniently, like a dog in a bag.
You know what I would give at this stage of my life to just be someone's dog in a bag?
I feel like that is the dream of a not insignificant number of people under the age of about 45. Like, I don't want a French bulldog. I want to be someone's French bulldog.
Yes. I want someone to buy me sweaters. I don't want to have to worry about like an IRA or like Roth versus like I don't want to have to worry about retirement.
It's funny because I think that being a mommy influencer and using your children for content is horrifically unethical.
And yet when it's a dog.
But I would sell my soul to be the lapdog of an influencer.
Or
just getting little like massages, eating at the table.
Someone like putting their fingers between my toe beans.
Eating human grade food while half the world starves.
Having like my owner knit me caps in the shape of the food that they're making me try. I am down.
Please.
Put me in a carrot top hat and feed me carrots. I want nothing else in this life.
I'm literally begging you.
Seriously.
I'll give it all up. It's fine.
What do I have to do? The devil, are you listening? Are you? Hello? It's me. Ready to make a deal.
Well, while we wait for Satan and
he's never on time,
Maddie's inevitable transformation into some kind of Yorkie poo.
I would like to be a big sloppy lab, but that's okay. And I don't know what that, read into that what you want.
Maddie, would you like to catch the listeners up on what happened?
Let's see.
In last week's episode of The End of the World, brought to you by Mary Shelley.
All right, so we heard the sad tale of Mary Shelley's life at this time, which in re-listening to this once it released, I was like, God, what a bummer. And that really plays out in volume 1. All right, so we've got our main man, Lionel.
Mm-hmm.
He had a wherewithal sort of ne'er-do-well, but well-meaning father, and a local villager of a mother. They both pass, and he's rough and tumble.
Mm-hmm.
We're in baby jail, big jail, I don't know, a rough and tumble teen jail. And then he comes to meet the king's son, and at first is like, why, you should have taken care of me. My dad sent a letter. And Adrian is like, oh my God, I've been looking for you forever. And now we're besties. In comes a military man, a hero. Raymond comes in and says, is very compelling and has a lot of riz.
Mm-hmm.
Lionel has a sister, and as does Adrian. There's sort of a she's the man-esque love triangle. No one loves who they actually love. Raymond ends up with Adrian's sister.
Lionel's sister.
Perdita. That's right, Perdita and Pongo. Raymond has abdicated.
Yeah, Raymond quit.
He quits and is like, I'm going back to the thing that I love.
He was the Lord Protector, and then he was just like, never mind.
JK.
Everyone gets to have fun but me.
Meh, meh, meh. Eventually, we leave it. We leave it that Raymond has gone off to Greece
Mm-hmm.
to fight for Greek independence, which is somehow still happening
Mm-hmm.
in the year of our Lord 2030 something.
2070. Well,
Oh,
actually, I think now we're in the 2090s.
Oh, Jesus, 2090 something. And despite the fact that Perdita and Raymond have sort of broken up after the kerfuffle with
Evadne.
Perdita's still like, we're going to Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Round it up. We're going to Greece. We're going to go get Raymond out of... He's been captured. He's a
Yes.
prisoner of war. And so we leave them as they are all about to embark. They're like on the boat, I think, leaving to go to Greece.
That is an admirable recapping of what happened thus far. And then there's one, I have to issue one mea culpa from episode 1.
Oh, okay.
Which was I said that the Greek War of Independence being waged in the book was the Greeks fighting for their independence from Turkey. Here's the thing. Turkey did not exist.
Yeah, I was about to say, is this like Ottoman Empire Prussia times?
It's essentially obviously the book is set in 2090, so she
Right.
does not outright say that it is the Ottoman Empire, but is clearly meant to be the Ottoman Empire. I flubbed it because she mostly just calls them the Turks.
Which is what... Yes, okay, yes.
Yes, so it's just the Turks. But it is essentially the 2090s equivalent of the Ottoman Empire.
Delightful.
Yes. So
A really minor mea culpa.
I
And
apologize.
kind of feels like it's Mary's fault. So, Mary.
It just felt weird saying the Turks. It just
Yeah,
feels...
because it feels gross.
It feels gross. Feels
Yeah.
bad.
Sure.
Anyway, so that's where we left off.
And you've promised me that volume 2 is like light and breezy. No?
The look on your face.
No? Oh. I'm the eyeballs emoji, everyone. 2 giant ovals.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you are just a pair of giant ovals right now.
That's me.
All right. Yeah, no. Real quick and easy. We go get Raymond and everyone lives happily ever after.
The end.
So,
Here we are.
we open volume 2. Going to get Raymond.
Off to Raymond. Is it so this is something I don't, and I'm sorry if we talked about this last time. How do they come to find that Raymond has been captured?
He's captured in battle. Like, everyone sees it happen.
Ah, so it's not like we got surrounded and all of us got captured. Like, he in the midst of battle gets...
Yeah, he's taken as like a prisoner of war.
Is it clear where they take all prisoners of war?
We do not get that in the weeds.
Oh, interesting.
We are dealing with this from a very high...
Okay, we're 30,000 feet.
It's just like, he has been taken.
Liam Neeson style.
They have him.
Perdita's like, I have a particular set of skills.
And Perdita, they get on the boat and Perdita's whole vibe kicking off is, I'm so, like, I love him again.
Oh, he's in danger, so suddenly
Well, but she's convinced that, like,
he's fine.
that love will win the day.
Oh, because that's worked really well for her in the past.
So Perdita is
A little Delulu?
extremely naive. And I think this is the characterization of Perdita that is kind of drawn out over the first half of volume 2, is that we slowly come to realize that Perdita is kind of all emotion and imagination. She's incapable of intellectualizing her feelings, essentially.
So, like, she's their dad?
Yeah.
In different ways, but that same, like, very ruled by emotion seems to be the name of the game.
Yes, and I think also that we are meant to understand that this is partly a consequence of her having spent her entire childhood. If you remember kind of from volume 1, like, they're talking about how she spends a lot of her time alone and she's kind of
Withdrawn.
she's building this other world in her head.
I got big Cosette vibes from her
Yeah.
here in my castle in the clouds.
Uh-huh. Yep,
Okay.
pretty much.
Okay.
And so, like...
And that doesn't make a fully functioning adult?
No, it definitely does. Yeah, that's what you want as a functioning human being.
You want to be really grounded.
Mm-hmm. You don't want any tether to reality at all. You
At
want to be
all.
all
I want helium balloon status.
impulse and sensation.
Whew.
That is the key to success.
Whew.
So they get on the boat and she starts out all bubbly, and then somewhere along the way, when they get over to Greece, she starts to be like, oh, he might be dead. And then she's just like all despair. You know, she's up, she's down, she's in, she's out.
She's hot, then she's cold.
Indeed.
Let the dated pop culture references continue.
And they get to Greece. Adrian sort of goes off politicking, and Raymond is ultimately surrendered back to the Greeks because they think he's dying. And they don't want him to die in custody, in their custody.
Okay.
It's like too much of an international incident.
Bad form.
Yeah. In what I can only imagine is some kind of, intentionally or otherwise, deep-seated catharsis. There's this drawn-out scene where Raymond is being brought to shore in a boat from a ship, and Perdita refuses to wait, and so she goes to him, and they kind of meet in these two little lifeboats in the middle of the bay, and she like leaps from one boat to the other boat and throws herself onto his chest and like clutches him to her bosom and weeps over him, and they're reunited, and it's beautiful. And I can't imagine why Mary Shelley would want to write a scene where two lovers are reunited,
especially when one's on the brink of death.
Yeah,
I can't imagine why she'd want to recreate what that might be like.
No.
She has no personal experience, and maybe having that as a hidden desire, or not so hidden desire.
Yeah. And like, I try not to bring authorial biography into stuff like too much, but it's a little on the nose.
It's
a little on the nose.
All right, Mary, we see you.
And so they are reunited.
And it feels so good.
For like 10 whole minutes.
Yep, okay. Tracks.
Raymond does not die.
Raymond, who did not die.
Thank you.
A little Muppet Christmas Carol for everyone. Anyone?
He miraculously recovers.
Of course.
And what do you think his first priority is?
To get back to the war. Am I right?
You called it.
Oh, man.
His wife and daughter are there. He's just been yanked back from the brink of death.
She just wept in a lifeboat on him.
Correct.
Okay, so he's like, yeah, it's nice you're here and all, but...
Pretty much.
Okay. And I bet that goes over really well.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. It's a fantastic idea. So Raymond declares that now that he's not dying, he, again, recovers miraculously quickly. It's time to finish what he started, and it is time to lay siege to Constantinople, because the liberation of Greece is not enough. They need to make the plan.
They have to overthrow the Ottoman Empire?
Yes, the plan is to make Constantinople the new capital of Greece.
Oh, so it's not enough to get independence. We must also take over our foes.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Now, is this something he's just coming up with, or is he like in sync with the actual Greeks?
Bold of you to assume that any Greek person
is ever mentioned,
is ever on the page.
That's
in
cool.
Any meaningful fashion, except as a sort of vague horde of people who either have needs or are disappointments.
Great.
Uh-huh.
All right. Written like a true colonizer.
No, I mean, in a little bit of fairness to Mary, again, there is so much to get through, and she establishes well enough that, like, Shelley cannot shake off her attitude that the English are sort of an inherently superior people. But by the standards of her day, and in this book, and in a general sense, she was opposed to colonization. She did not think that other people were inherently lesser, like, because of their sort of race or breeding. She allows herself a certain sort of intra-European judgment of people, but Mary Shelley's idea of the sort of superiority of the English is that they are, like, stiffened by their cold climate, right?
Yes.
That kind of thing. Because one of the points that she's trying to make, like one of the big underpinnings of this book, again, is this idea that people are shaped by what happens to them. And this was a big debate of the day, and this was a big debate that was being engaged in around the transatlantic slave trade, which she opposed. And part of her goal with Frankenstein, as well as this book, was to illustrate that people are what you make them, and that no one is born,
a little nature versus nurture.
Very much so, which was pretty radical at the time. And so the Greeks, by Shelley's conception, are, they really benefit from having this dashing Englishman at the helm.
Sure.
But it's not because they're Greek. It's because their warm climate
Makes their brains soft.
Makes them, hot-headed.
So we're just to assume that they're like down to clown with whatever Raymond is proposing.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we do. It is established that he is genuinely the hero of Athens. When Lionel and Perdita arrive, there are people like weeping in the street because they've heard that he's dying. So he's very popular. And again, you could tell Shelley's a little bit trying to give Byron in death.
A little bit of a nod.
Yeah, because Byron definitely had the skills
Sure.
and wherewithal.
Sure. People were definitely weeping about that war hero for all that combat he saw.
But also importantly, they are kind of reenacting the Crusades here, right? And that is Raymond's goal,
Great.
very explicitly, is
Cool.
to take Constantinople from the hands of the infidels
Okay.
and
Sure.
like literally plant his flag in it.
Okay.
Perdita says, "Babe, you can do whatever you want, but I'm coming with you."
Oh.
She refuses to be separated from him again.
And they like brought a child with them?
Yeah, Clara's there. She's
Okay.
just hanging out.
Saying what up?
Yeah.
Getting a classical worldly education.
Yeah, being a small child in the middle of a war.
Cool.
But before they plunge into battle, there is one little aside,
Ruh-roh.
because Lionel notes that Perdita, on insisting that she accompany him, it says, "One word, in truth, had alarmed her more than battles or sieges, during which she trusted Raymond's high command would exempt him from danger. That word, as yet it was no more to her, was plague. This enemy to the human race had begun early in June to raise its serpent head on the shores of the Nile. Parts of Asia, not usually subject to this evil, were infected. It was in Constantinople. But as each year that city experienced a like visitation, small attention was paid to those accounts which declared more people to have died there already than usually make up the accustomed prey of the whole of the hotter months."
I like that Perdita thinks that like by her being there.
She's more worried about plague than she is about Raymond being killed in battle, because she
inherently trusts he's capable at that. And what didn't take him down this time was not a battle wound,
Exactly.
but illness
That's the concern.
has made him soft.
And so we charge into battle.
Now, are Lionel and is everyone going?
We're all there. Everyone's here, except Idris, who again has been left home with the kids.
Okay. Wise move.
For the sake of time, I'm going to skim the battle, but suffice it to say, we get the battle narrated by Lionel, and Lionel, much like Adrian, cannot reconcile himself with all of this bloodshed. And he just sort of is like, well, this is Raymond's thing, I guess. But wow, we're just murdering a lot of innocent people here. Oops.
My bad.
Pretty much.
Raymond's bad.
But we have a quick aside before we finish laying siege to Constantinople,
Okay.
which is that Lionel is riding through the battlefield after a battle, through the carnage. There's bodies everywhere. And there's been a drought for like quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he hears a scream. The dress of this person was that of a soldier, but the bared neck and arms and the continued shrieks discovered a female thus disguised. I dismounted to her aid, and while she, with heavy groans and her hand placed on her side, resisted my attempt to lead her on. In the hurry of the moment, I forgot that I was in Greece, and in my native accents endeavored to soothe the sufferer. With wild and terrific exclamations did the lost, dying Evadne,
What?
for it was she, recognize the language of her lover. Pain and fever from her wound had deranged her intellects, while her piteous cries and feeble efforts to escape penetrated me with compassion.
Okay, so she also followed Raymond.
She followed Raymond and was
and has been a soldier in his
army the whole time, apparently. Welcome back, Evadne!
Is it going to be made clear whether he knew this?
He did not.
Oh, okay.
And now she is dying,
Yep.
forgotten and unloved,
Okay.
in the middle of a battlefield.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that would be the time that Lionel would hear someone.
Yes, of course.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Don't be silly.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense that Lionel would specifically
Whew.
find her
Fate is a fickle mistress.
in this battlefield because this book 100% does believe in fate in some fashion. And we get Evadne's farewell from this earth.
Okay.
She says...
She's Eponine. There's a lot of Les Mis in this that I'm now seeing. She's Eponine. Okay. A little fall of rain.
She says, "This is the end of love, yet not the end. There is the end. There we meet again. Many living deaths have I borne for thee, O Raymond, and now I expire thy victim. By my death I purchase thee, lo, the instruments of war, fire, the plague are my servitors. I dared, I conquered them all, till now. I have sold myself to death, with the sole condition that thou shouldst follow me. Fire and war and plague unite for thy destruction. O my Raymond, there is no safety for thee." And then she dies.
Does she do this just with Lionel there, or does Lionel take her back and she does this to a public?
She does this just with Lionel there on the battlefield,
okay.
just right there on the battlefield.
So she like curses
with her dying breath.
Raymond.
Uh-huh. And
Great.
she curses him specifically with fire and, what is it?
War and plague.
Fire, war, and plague.
Okay. What are the 4 horsemen?
Yes!
Where's famine? You forgot famine, Evadne.
Come on, Evadne.
Come on, make it a true quartet.
And so she curses him and dies.
Cool.
Yep.
What a thing for Raymond, or for Lionel to have to just like witness and now be the keeper of that knowledge.
Yeah, which he takes straight to Raymond.
Well, I mean, okay, imagine that someone we knew died in my arms in front of me, and their dying words were like, "Grace, I curse thee with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse." I immediately would leave that scene and text you and be like,
Hey, pal.
listen,
Hey, pal.
I don't want to be alarmist.
Based on the way that this novel goes, if a mutual acquaintance of ours dies in your arms, cursing me with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse with their last breath, don't tell me that shit. I don't need to know. You see, look in my eyes right now. I don't need to know.
Yeah, but then I just have to know?
Tell other people.
That seems really hard for me.
Put a blind item in a gossip rag.
Oh, okay. Right to the Washington Post. Dear Carolyn, a mutual acquaintance died in my arms, cursing one of my much better friends with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. What should I do? Signed, Confused on the Battlefield.
I wonder what her response would be.
I don't know, but I'm more interested in what the people in the Facebook comments in the post would be.
I wonder if we sent that in, if she would publish it.
I would hope so.
Well, dear Carolyn wasn't there, and so
Lionel trots right back to Raymond and said,
correct.
"Listen, man, don't shoot the messenger."
And it turns out Raymond has been having troubling
Dreams,
omens
visions. Great.
of doom.
Great.
And so his response is basically like, I knew it.
Locusts.
But what he says specifically is, she has said nothing but what I knew before, though this is confirmation. Fire, the sword, and plague, they may all be found in yonder city. On my head alone may they fall.
Okay.
Yes? You have something to say?
I'm just like, how exhausting the like white man martyr complex is sometimes. Okay. I'll fall only upon my head. Okay.
So,
when is it ever fallen only upon your head?
when does it ever fall only upon any one person's
Here's
head?
the thing, it's not a plague if it's only on a single head.
That's just called an illness.
That's just called you're ill. Okay?
But it turns out Raymond is increasingly convinced of his own upcoming death.
That always makes people act really rationally.
So rationally.
Oh my God, it makes them so rational.
Like at one point he says, all I ask of Greece is a grave. And he pulls Lionel aside.
I like that he's also not dramatic.
Oh, he's not dramatic at all. No.
Oh my God, he's so rational and he's so just even keeled.
He pulls Lionel aside to explain to him essentially, like, I'm doomed. I am not long for this world. And inexplicably, he does all of this in front of Clara.
Great dad move.
There's just this whole scene. It's three of them, again, in a boat, because we are always in boats.
Always. That's where Lionel feels safest.
And Raymond and Lionel have this whole dialogue about how Raymond is increasingly convinced that his life is almost over, and all he, like, his only hope is that he can do something with his life to, like, make it all worth it. At some point, you kind of feel Raymond and Lionel go, "Oh, there's a child here."
Oh, shit.
There's a little kid,
Oh, no.
like, right there,
Just kidding, babe.
just staring at them both with, like, big horrified eyes.
Just talking about a weird movie we saw the other day. I don't know.
And he's basically like, "Don't worry about me, Clara. Just take care of your mom."
That's not scarring at all. Oh, maybe irrelevant.
And that's, yeah. Sorry, Clara.
Sorry, babe. The end is nigh.
The end is nigh. And we trot on to the siege of Constantinople.
I like that despite all of this, he's still like, gotta go do this Constantinople thing.
It's not in spite of all this. It's because of all this.
Yes.
So Raymond has decided that
This is the one thing that will make his life worth living and
Yes.
his death justified.
Yes.
Great.
Nailed it.
Cool.
They go into battle. They lay siege to Constantinople, and it goes weirdly well
An omen in and of itself.
because remember that drought I mentioned?
Cool. It's easier to kill people, I guess, and lay siege when they're super dehydrated and all of their crops have died.
Yeah, you know what drought triggers? And you know what else is complicating the famine and the drought?
Fire. War.
The plague.
The plague.
The
Great.
plague.
All of them.
Constantinople is riddled with the plague.
Do we ever get anything more specific than just the plague? Are we to assume that for her context, this is like bubonic plague?
It's
This is a history nerd question. But
It's a unique plague. It is
Oh.
not specifically bubonic plague, but it is just plague,
okay.
sometimes styled in all caps.
Oh, in that like thicker, dark, chunky all caps?
Yeah.
No, I like that. I'm upsetting. This is the second time I've talked about plague today. This is cool.
In what context were you talking about plague outside of this book?
My dad has pneumonia.
Oh, no.
And I told him several days ago, hey, I think you have pneumonia, because he's like tested negative for the flu and COVID and all this stuff. And he described his symptoms. And I was like, I feel fairly confident you have pneumonia. He's like, it's weird. No doctor has brought up pneumonia yet. I'm like, that's concerned. But they had taken chest x-rays. And so I was like, well, that's how they diagnose like a bad case of pneumonia. That's probably what they're looking for. And he texted me this morning. He's like, I didn't need a doctor. I just needed you. I have pneumonia. And I was like, yeah, I thought so. And then he sent me a link to, this is such a dad thing to do. He sent me a link to drugs.com for the antibiotic that they had prescribed him. And in the second sentence, it was like, sometimes prescribed for treatment of anthrax and the plague. And so I copied it and I sent it back to him in a text. I was like, this is really uplifting language. Good morning. You have pneumonia. This is for anthrax and the plague. Also, it like makes your tendons like dissipate. I don't know.
Oh, no.
We had a whole conversation about
Oh, I don't like that at all.
antibiotics this morning. But yes, I've already talked about the plague once today.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, modern medicine.
So you and your dad are talking about the plague.
And here we are.
So are the residents of Constantinople,
Man.
because they catch a group of men escaping the city under the cover of darkness. And when questioned, it says, the men disdainfully repelled the idea of having deserted the defense of their city. And one, the youngest among them, in answer to the taunt of a sailor, exclaimed, "Take it, Christian dogs. Take the palaces, the gardens, the mosques, the abode of our fathers. Take plague with them. Pestilence is the enemy we fly. If she be your friend, hug her to your bosoms. The curse of Allah is on Stamboul. Share ye her fate."
All right. So, city's cursed with plague.
Uh-huh.
The city that the taking of Raymond has decided is the only thing that his life is worth living for.
Uh-huh.
Great.
They reach the gates of Constantinople because there is no one to stop them.
Which, like, no one's like, hey, alarm bells.
Well, they get there and the Greek troops won't enter the city. and Raymond loses his shit.
Cool.
Uh-huh.
Great. I love this.
He essentially calls them all cowards.
Listen, you pusses. We're going in there. Plague be damned. Weird omens and death curses be damned.
And he says, "The enemy is already vanquished. The pleasant places, the noble dwellings, and spoil of the city are already yours. Force the gate. Enter and possess the seats of your ancestors, your own inheritance." Which isn't ominous at all.
Yuck. Yeah, that never backfires.
And they refuse. The soldiers refuse to enter the city, and eventually the army kind of starts to disband itself. And Raymond has what I think is the inevitable crisis of ambition, right? He's so wrapped up in this idea that he has to do this specific thing to make his life worthwhile that he is, spoiler alert, dooming himself.
Mm-hmm.
And all of mankind.
That's the cool part.
I think this is very intentional. This is an archetype, right? Like,
Sure.
Shelley wants us to see that this is the sort of wages of ambition.
Do you think that she's also aligning that archetype with Byron? Or do you think that only goes as far as, like, some of the...
I don't know, honestly. I mean...
Like, how deep, I guess, do you think the Byron
died...
comparison goes?
in part as the result of his own...
Correct.
impulsiveness.
Correct.
But I think while writers draw from life all the time, it's very rarely one thing. It's very rarely
Sure.
one person, one source of inspiration. And I think as Raymond continues to spiral toward the sort of inevitable conclusion of his obsessions, Raymond is not just Byron. He is so many powerful men. And so many powerful men who do not care what suffering, what horror, what crime against humanity must be wrought, so long as they get to feel like they put their name in the book with all the other impressive
in the
men
name
through
of
history.
ambition, a lot can be overlooked.
And
To the person doing the ambitioning.
and Raymond is melting down. He gets a multiple page sort of rage-filled monologue.
This is what happens, though, when, like, you either attain the thing and it doesn't make you feel the way that you thought it would, or you get to it and it's not quite what you wanted it to be. You almost always see these situations where someone just, like, throws a adult temper tantrum.
Yeah, from Elon Musk to the billionaire sub.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So I've got a couple choice quotes from Raymond's
Whew.
meltdown. He says, "Am I forever to be the sport of fortune? Must man, the heaven climber, be forever the victim of the crawling reptiles of his species?"
Okay, I'm that Liz Lemon gif where my doctor tells me I can't roll my eyes too much or they're going to get stuck in my head.
"The prayer of my youth was to be one among those who render the pages of Earth's history splendid, who exalt the race of men and make this little globe a dwelling of the mighty. Alas for Raymond, the prayer of his youth is wasted, the hopes of his manhood are null. From my dungeon in yonder city I cried, 'Soon I will be thy lord.' When Evadne pronounced my death, I thought that the title of Victor of Constantinople would be written on my tomb, and I subdued all mortal fear."
You could be really hard-pressed to find a character that I can relate to less. The idea of wanting your name in a book
Well, and
is very hard for me to begin with.
And one of the things that Shelley also underlines about a paragraph later is that based on sort of their conception of disease at the time, if Raymond will just wait for winter, he will be able to enter Constantinople.
Okay, so this is a disease of the hotter months.
It is. Their conception of contagion is still vaguely miasma-based. It's not... It's more about, like, areas becoming infected with the plague rather than individual humans, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But Lionel is trying to tell Raymond, if you just wait for winter, you can take Constantinople with the full support of all of the Greeks and all of the armies. We can do it if you just wait.
That can't be tolerated, of course.
Absolutely not.
Do we have any concept right now of what time of year it is?
It is summer.
Okay, so that means waiting through fall.
Yes.
So 3 months tops. This man can't wait 3 months tops.
Correct. There's a little bit of shuffling here where essentially, because the army has disbanded, Raymond sends Lionel off to try and get reinforcements from elsewhere who will hopefully be less cowardly so he can enter Constantinople.
Let's squeamish about dying from an unknown and terrible plague.
Lionel goes charging off. He fails to get support as quickly as Raymond is hoping he will. And Lionel is riding back, and he sort of crests a hill and sees from too far away to stop it Raymond beating down the gates of Constantinople with a hatchet alone.
Okay, so we've gone full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
We're just like, we're undone.
He beats the gates down and he's about to enter. Soldiers are standing around, but they all fall back. No one will follow him into the city.
And I have to think the city is like mostly deserted, or everyone that's in it is dead or dying.
Correct.
Yes? Okay.
Yes. And again, Lionel's watching all of this essentially like through a looking glass from like,
no.
You got it. Even as he spoke, the crowd receded from him. Indignation now transported him. His words, I guessed, were fraught with disdain. Then, turning from his coward followers, he addressed himself to enter the city alone. His very horse seemed to back from the fatal entrance. His dog, his faithful dog, lay moaning and supplicating in his path. In a moment more, he had plunged the rowels into the sides of the stung animal, who bounded forward, and he, the gateway past, was galloping up the broad and deserted street.
So like everything in nature is like, hey man.
Even his dog
is like, hey, sir.
It says that Lionel forgets the distance between us and he shouts, I will go with thee, Raymond. Even he can't resist the romance of it. Like, another thing that Shelley is really good at kind of subtly working in here is that everyone can know something is a bad idea. Everyone can know that this shouldn't happen. And yet, as humans, we can't separate ourselves from the romance of an image, of a loved one, of a...
Sure.
You know?
How do you think that Confederate memory came to be?
Mm-hmm. So Raymond charges in, and then, at that moment, a crash was heard. Thunder-like, it reverberated through the sky while the air was darkened. A moment more, and the old walls again met my sight, while over them hovered a murky cloud. Fragments of buildings whirled above, half seen in smoke, while flames burst out underneath.
There's that fire.
And continued explosions filled the air with terrific thunders. Constantinople explodes.
It's good that this is not subtle.
The whole city explodes, with Raymond inside. We get this... It's fun. The way she describes it, it almost reminds me of like watching like videos of like nuclear bombs going on. It's this massive explosion. It incinerates it levels almost the whole city at once. And then, strange to say, huge white thunderclouds lifted themselves up from the southern horizon and gathered overhead. They were the first blots on the blue expanse that I had seen for months. And amidst this havoc and despair, they inspired pleasure. The vault above became obscured. Lightning flashed from the heavy masses, followed instantaneously by crashing thunder. Then the big rain fell.
Again, glad nature isn't sending any signals. So, is Raymond lost in the explosion?
Raymond is dead.
Oh, okay.
Raymond has died in the explosion. And...
in the leveling of Constantinople.
Yes, and Constantinople has been...
leveled. It's no more.
Flattened. And as predicted, it's full of plague victims.
Which now have been pulverized and are up in the air.
But there's no time to think about that because Raymond is dead and they find him only because his faithful dog is still behind him or beside him.
Is the dog alive?
Briefly.
Oh.
Yeah. It's very Odysseus.
Mm.
You know, he comes home and his faithful dog sees him and then dies. Similar vibes. And we put Raymond into a hero's tomb and...
in Constantinople?
In Greece.
Oh, okay. Hero of Athens.
Yes, exactly.
Does it get to say Victor of Constantinople on his headstone.
I think so.
Oh, thank God.
But what's really important here is Perdita, who is
Ill.
disintegrating.
Yeah.
We have to gloss over this pretty fast, but essentially people keep trying to be like, Perdita, have you considered hanging in there and thinking about like the child that you have and need to raise? And Raymond himself and then Lionel both kind of give her a talk that's like, everything that you loved in Raymond is alive in your child. Take care of your child.
She's like, I can't.
Correct. She tells Lionel to take Clara back to England with him, and she is going to stay in Greece until she finally dies and can cast herself onto Raymond's tomb.
Cool.
Lionel drugs her with laudanum and then smuggles her onto a boat to England because he's like, if I could just get her back to Windsor, she will remember that she has a child who needs her.
I'm going to guess she doesn't remember that even when they get to Windsor.
They don't get to Windsor.
Oh, sure.
She throws herself off the boat.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Remember this was a person that she didn't want to be married to anymore?
Not anymore. Well,
we've glossed over that, I guess.
Doesn't matter. It's all romantic now, isn't
well,
it?
It's yeah.
Right. Again, she's all sensibility. She's all emotion. And so she flings herself into the sea.
Great.
I think they have to turn the boat around. They bury her next to Raymond. Then they go back to England.
Glad they haven't scarred their child, though, in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely not.
She's probably going to grow up super cool.
And they finally, after all of this, poor Lionel has lost his sister, but he's going to do everything he can to be there for Clara. And they are back in England.
Where's Adrian?
He's around. This is mostly about Lionel right now, though.
Okay.
Because it's his sister.
Fair.
And they get to Portsmouth. And to close chapter 3 of volume 2, when they arrive in Portsmouth, a strange story was rife here. A few days before, a tempest-struck vessel had appeared off the town. The hull was parched-looking and cracked, the sails rent, and bent in a careless, unseamanlike manner, the shrouds tangled and broken. Only one of the crew appeared to have arrived with her. He had got to shore, and had walked a few paces toward the town, and then, vanquished by malady and approaching death, had fallen on the inhospitable beach. He was found stiff, his hands clenched and pressed against his breast. His skin nearly black, his matted hair and bristly beard were signs of a long, protracted misery. It was whispered that he had died of the plague. The body of the man who landed was buried deep in the sands, and none could tell more than that the vessel was American-built, and that several months before the Fortunatus had sailed from Philadelphia, of which no tidings were afterwards received.
All right, so maybe America's gone.
Plague!
All right, so we've wiped out the Ottoman Empire Turkish area. America is apparently under plague siege, and now it's arrived in England.
The plague is spreading
This isn't timely at all.
across primarily they get back, they go home, and kind of two things are happening. Plague is spreading, but has not yet reached France, Germany, and Italy, which are sort of the barrier between England and the rest of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It's apparently in America, but America's
Far.
very far. And we're digging back a little bit into politics because Ryland, who we met oh so briefly in Volume 1, is gearing up to become the Lord Protector.
I was just about to ask, so who's the Lord Protector now after Raymond was like, deuces?
It's about to be Ryland, who is the, rough around the edges, self-made man from the, who, came up from the lower classes.
Bootstraps.
The bootstraps guy who was Raymond's chief opponent when we first meet Raymond and he's still scheming to reinstate the monarchy.
Yes.
Ryland is a populist, essentially.
Gotcha. Okay. So has Ryland already been elected, or we're on the eve of election time?
We're going to kind of jump through time here, but basically Ryland is elected.
Great.
Plague is spreading, but is not yet encroaching upon London.
Right.
And there begin to be sort of omens happening around the globe.
Sure.
So reports are coming in of a black sun rising.
Great.
Uh-huh.
That always is good.
Which leads to a lot of panic.
As it would.
By the way, we find out very quickly in passing that Lionel and Idris had 3 children and one of them died while he was in Greece. And it's just like, meh, moving on.
But I have this niece, so she can replace that one. We're still at 3 some.
Pretty much.
Total of 3.
It comes up because one of the things that we learn about Idris is that ever since she lost one of her children, she has become very intensely protective of the other 2 and very concerned that some childhood illness will carry them off.
Rational,
yeah. But she's a very good and very involved mother in a way that her mother never was. But I think part of the idea here is that disease specifically is like a very intense preoccupation for her.
Okay.
But even as things become increasingly concerning, Alfred has grown up and he's going to Eton, and which is right around Windsor, I guess. We get an aside where Lionel is essentially meditating on his hopes for his son and for even his son's friends. And this jumped out at me because I feel like this is an attitude that has really been lost. And there are definitely like toxic sides to it, but I don't see the sentiment conveyed in this fashion much anymore. It says, and so he's watching all of his son and all of his friends like play, and he says, "Here were the future governors of England. Here were the beings who were to carry on the vast machine of society. Here were the lovers, husbands, fathers. Here the landlord, the politician, the soldier. Some fancied that they were even now ready to appear on the stage, eager to make one among the dramatic personae of active life. Willingly do I give place to thee, dear Alfred. Advance, offspring of tender love, child of our hopes. Advance, a soldier on the road to which I have been the pioneer. I will make way for thee."
That's nice.
It is. And, in the context of this novel, obviously what we're kind of underlining here is that these are the hopes of kind of all humanity. But it's very rare now that you see people kind of talking about like, stepping aside for the good of the younger generation.
No, we wouldn't know anything about that.
Anyway, climate change is happening.
Cool.
In the book.
Just in the book.
Yeah. Uh-huh, yeah.
It's not real. It's just in this book. A work of fiction.
So something has happened, and all of a sudden England, not just England, all of Europe is being swept by these sort of catastrophic storms on never-before-seen scales, which are causing total havoc. Flooding, ships are being blown to pieces, cities and towns are flooding.
So we're getting like hurricanes and tornadoes, but in Europe.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
All right.
For months, all winter.
Sounds like nothing we would know about.
No. Slowly, and again, we have to do a fair amount of this in summary, but what happens slowly over the course of the next couple of chapters is that the plague creeps closer and closer, and
I mean, I certainly didn't think it was going to recede.
Yeah. And it's, again, like, if you have the patience to read this, I do think it's worth a read because she does a very good job kind of like drawing out this tension and of portraying like what it feels like when this news is coming in kind of bits and pieces, and first it's here and then it's there and then, oh, it's a little close, like, is it going to reach Germany? Is it going to reach France? Is it going to,
Did you find this to be like in sharp contrast to like how quickly, I feel like, in perspective to how information came through during COVID, which whilst it felt like it took a long time to know things, at the same time it was all instantaneous because of the internet.
Yeah, it takes like a full year. Like,
right. Can you imagine?
No.
Yeah. Mary.
It is uncomfortably familiar when you're reading it.
I'm sure.
Just like, oh, I kind of remember this. Like, oh, now it's in this country. Oh, now it's in Boston.
Or like, oh, like now there's a variant.
Yeah. And poor Lionel, it's on his son's birthday. He's like watching all of the young people dance and frolic, and he has this sudden vision. And he says, "At first the tripping measure lifted my spirit with it, and for a moment my eyes gladly followed the mazes of the dance. The revulsion of thought passed like keen steel to my heart. You are all going to die, I thought. Already your tomb is built up around you. Because you are gifted with agility and strength, you fancy that you live. But frail is the bower of flesh that encaskets life. Dissoluble the silver cord that binds you to it. Not one of you, oh fated crowd, can escape. Not one. Already the gay dance vanished. The green sward was strewn with corpses. The blue air above became fetid with deathly exhalations. Shriek, ye clarions. Ye loud trumpets howl. Pile dirge upon dirge. Rouse the funereal chords. Let the air ring with dire wailing. Let wild discord rush on the wings of the wind.
Uplifting.
Very cheerful.
Thanks, Lionel. You're all gonna die.
And he sort of shakes himself out of this vision. You know, everyone has kind of rushed to his side because they're like, hey, what's wrong with you? And he manages to pretend to be okay for their sake. And again, huge parts of this book are sort of case studies in masculinity and how one is supposed to handle a crisis. Not just masculinity, but mostly masculinity, because men have all the agency, which Shelley very well knew.
How old is Lionel at this point?
I think they're all meant to be in sort of their mid-30s.
Oh, that's
mid
it?
to late 30s.
Oh, okay.
Well, I would say like 37 to 42.
Okay.
Somewhere in that age range.
All right.
Shelley loves to sort of give you one example and then give you the counterexample right after the other because that's effective writing.
Mm.
And so Lionel is suddenly overcome with essentially the certainty that they and everyone they love are doomed. But he also knows that there is no point in driving everyone else into a frenzy. And at the same time, Ryland, the Lord Protector, appears. It's very cinematic because he comes kind of stumbling into the scene and he looks like he's aged 10 years and he's like, the plague
is here.
The plague is here.
Drama.
And then we get the two schools of thought in a crisis because Ryland has showed up not just to shout his head off, but to say that he's fleeing.
Oh. This Lord Protector business doesn't really seem to be something anyone's that interested in.
The men retreat to discuss, and Adrian is like,
over cigars and port.
Exactly. And Adrian is like, so as Lord Protector, like, what are you going to do? And
deuce out.
Ryland says, do not mock me with that title. Death and disease level all men. I neither pretend to protect nor govern a hospital. Such will England quickly become.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Realist, I guess.
When I am a plague-spotted corpse, where will my duties be? Every man for himself. The devil take the protectorship, say I, if it expose me to danger.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Although Ryland is temporarily convinced to go back to London so as not to send the country into a total panic, Adrian is ultimately going to wind up being the Lord Protector, as was always meant to be.
Yes, because he will make decisions for the greater good, while it's the two that have come before him cannot.
And it's funny.
He'd wear a mask.
Adrian would wear a mask. One of the things that jumped out at me is that, so what happens ultimately to Ryland is, as soon as he can get away with it, like as soon as they have handed off power formally, he shuts himself away in his estate. Like he goes to his estate and barricades himself there. And what I kept thinking about as the narrative sort of looped back around to him every now and again is that is what happens. Like those are the people who are the protagonists of most contemporary apocalypse narratives, right? Like they're the ones who come stumbling out.
Yes.
And then get to have a whole second act. Ryland, I think, significantly more realistically, barricades himself into his estate and makes it a while, like a couple of years, but ultimately is found dead and all alone.
I mean, of course.
That's where rugged individualism gets you.
Yep.
Is dead, but alone and dead.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of dead with
other people.
People who care about you. Congratulations, Ryland.
You did it for a while. Thumbs up. Muscle emoji. I have a storytelling question.
Mm-hmm.
In revisiting the introduction, the framing device at the very beginning, the way it reads, or the way I remember it reading, is that this is all these different prophecies strung together in a way that the author thought it made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any allusion to any of that ever again?
No.
Okay.
We'll touch on the framing device again at the very, very end.
Okay.
Because I think the framing device is very important as a sort of counterpoint to a lot of the popular critiques of the novel. But it doesn't really come up again until like the very, very bitter end of the novel.
Interesting. Okay. There's just lots of talks of like omens, which I associate with like prophecies.
Sure.
So I didn't know if it was at all alluded.
No, once you get into the regular narrative, the framing device is just gone forever.
Okay. All right, Mary. I see you.
It's just Lionel. It's just Lionel.
Just Lionel out here, Lioneling.
It's the Lionel hour. All Lioneling all the time. And so the plague begins to tear through England. As the vestiges of normalcy kind of slough off, step by step, we get one final nomination for Lord Protector when Adrian is finally officially handed the title. Everyone who can afford to flee London has fled London. And so Lionel is put in the position of having to be the one to nominate Adrian. And in a sort of final act of selflessness, he tries to nominate himself instead, because they both understand that this role is a death sentence, that to be the person trying to hold the country together in the face of plague means that you will inevitably probably die of the plague.
Right.
Lionel tries to kind of throw himself on that sword, and Adrian denies him by invoking his birthright.
Interesting.
I think it is actually really interesting. I don't think Mary Shelley is trying to say that there is any real superiority to the monarchy. But at the same time, it is made abundantly clear that Adrian is the person who should be carrying England through what we are going to find out soon is its final days.
Do you think that that's more to do with, like, that was the one card that Adrian could play that he thought that Lionel wouldn't argue against? Or that it comes from actually a subconscious sort of superiority?
I think, so it's made clear in the narrative that Adrian is just doing this because he knows it's a card that he can play.
Okay.
And it works. But for Adrian to be the one who was sort of equipped all along to take on this monumental
about
there's what Adrian is doing sort of narratively, and then there's like, what is the book saying? And I can't decide if Shelley is sort of at the end of the day saying that there is a certain nobility, or there are old folk tales, like fairy tales. There is an idea that, like, in England's greatest hour of need, a king will rise.
Sure.
So I can't decide if she's trying to kind of subtly be like, well, at the end of the day, the monarchy is like maybe useful.
Or if it's someone will rise.
Yes.
Pull the sword out of the stone.
Yes.
Find the sword in the lake.
If she's kind of invoking some of these apocalyptic folk tales, you know? Or a little bit of both.
Sure. I think there's a very real possibility that some of that is like so ingrained in you as a person just who exists in that society that you can't help but have some of it come out, even if you're not trying to do that.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, the fact that she founded this whole novel on being like, and we just don't have a monarchy anymore, and it's totes cool, is like,
is wild in and of itself.
Damn, girl.
And the fact that I think we now have to check off that she's like kind of, this is like a third genre that she's pioneering, which is climate related, which up until now, I mean, this is very off the cuff. I don't know enough about climate change related fiction, but I cannot think that there were a ton of people writing about this.
Yeah, the summers are getting hotter and the winters are getting stormier and like weirdly warmer. Like that's one of the things that becomes a problem is it's not snowing enough.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
And they're not getting hard freezes, which is bad because plague.
Mm-hmm.
And they're relying on the winters to kill the plague.
And then as soon as it gets warm, the plague comes back?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So Adrian's Lord Protector.
And society is falling apart.
Poor Adrian.
And there are like roaming maniacs, you know, screaming about how this is divine punishment and everyone's going to die.
We love that. That's a cool energy to bring to an already situation rife with tension.
Yep. The crops are failing.
Sure.
International trade has completely ceased.
Well, sure, you're not going to send a boat to a plague country.
Well, it's implied that and this is taking place over like months and ultimately like a couple of years. Plague has so thoroughly devastated continental Europe that there is no one left to trade with. Nothing is coming back across the English Channel. And so
out with a whimper, not a bang.
And so England's economy is slowly collapsing, and also the country is filling with refugees who are coming in hopes of outrunning the plague, essentially. And all of a sudden there is a financial crisis. There's not enough food and there's not enough space. She gets into like the logistics.
Interesting. Not a thing I feel like she had to do.
No.
So an interesting choice.
Also, there's floods.
Sure.
Before Christmas, half of England was underwater. Rome, Florence, and Pisa all wash away. Germany and Russia are also drowning.
Traditional flood areas.
Yeah.
But Lionel, we're alive.
The core family are doing okay.
Are they all in London?
They are still at
Windsor.
They are staying at Windsor as long as possible. Shelley does a really incredible job kind of imagining what it looks like when the world slowly succumbs to plague. And the one thing where she is off base, but in such an endearing way, is that as the refugee crisis mounts, there's a little sort of political maneuvering, and they manage to kind of levy a new tax on what's left of the aristocracy. And all of the remaining nobility have to sort of like subdivide their estates into like functional gardens and homes.
I hope that the thing that she gets wrong is that they all do this really willingly and are nice about it.
To give up their pleasure grounds to the agriculturist, to diminish sensibly the number of horses kept for the purposes of luxury throughout the country, were means obvious but unpleasing. Yet, to the honor of the English, let it be recorded that although natural disinclination made them delay a while, when the misery of their fellow creatures became glaring, an enthusiastic generosity inspired their decrees. The most luxurious were often the first to part with their indulgences.
I like this version of the world better in some ways.
Isn't that nice?
That's so nice that she thinks that they would just generously give up their wealth and luxury.
Yeah.
For the greater good.
For the greater good and to support the many refugees.
Not even fellow Englishmen.
And
I also love her, like, let it be recorded. We were so fucking generous.
But also, this is all announced as just a matter of course. Like, of course England would throw their doors open. Of course England would do everything that they could to support everyone who is in need. How could we be so cruel and uncaring to our fellow man?
Just you wait. Just you wait, Henry Higgins. Just you wait. All right. On with it, then. On with it.
So, in one way, it's just like, oh, Mary.
That's so sweet.
That's nice. Better luck next time.
It's so wrong, but it's so nice.
You know, society continues to crumble. Calamity creeps closer and closer, and finally there are a few cases of plague in Windsor, and it becomes increasingly apparent that no one is going to be safe. And they're sort of trapped in this long, slow decline. It gets very bad every summer, and then there's a respite every winter, and then it gets bad every summer, and there's a respite every winter. And she sort of draws a portrait of a country that is full of people who are not cruel, not unkind, not stupid, but who are kind of slowly succumbing to a perfectly understandable madness at the length and of this descent.
Oh, yeah.
Like
this is out with a whimper, not a bang. It's like, let's draw this out as much as humanly possible. Plus, during all of it, you probably, like, you can't go anywhere. You can't socialize. You're just, like, stuck.
That's one of the things I think she gets right is she writes at length about how people have to feel like they're doing something. And so what winds up happening is that all of the people in the city go to the country, and the people in the suburbs go even more remote, and the people in the country go flooding into the city because everyone has to feel like they're taking some kind of action, even if it's ultimately futile. And that's
very human.
So accurate.
Yes. So human. Talk to all the millennials who took up new weird hobbies throughout the pandemic just to feel a thing.
Lionel has to go into London at some point, which is where, so Adrian has been in London this whole time.
Beyond just calling it the plague, does she give any other detail of, like, illness itself?
No, and
Fast, slow, airborne.
well, so it's important to remember that they did not have a good conception of how contagion worked.
No, and that's very true. I'm just wondering if she took, like, a swing at it.
It is airborne,
Okay.
but not quite. Like, there are scenes where people breathe on you in very close quarters and you're like, well, I have the plague now. But not, that's more having to do with, like, sharing the miasma of unclean air, and the idea of catching it through just, like, normal chit chat is clearly not something that's on her radar.
Okay.
So it is a miasma of bad air
Sure.
that is just slowly creeping over the globe.
All right.
They do talk about quarantines, but it's already too
late.
It's immediately too late for that. Possibly because Constantinople blew up and launched the plague into the atmosphere.
Air? Okay, cool.
But we don't know. It's thoroughly possible that Raymond ended the world.
And she wants you to draw that conclusion.
I'm not sure.
Oh,
I
okay.
think she's leaving it kind of ambiguous on purpose.
Like, oh, this might have happened no matter what, but it might have been just this one man's ambition.
Yeah. To, like, really, really emphasize that parallel. Just before England sort of disintegrates almost beyond recognition, Lionel goes into London to see Adrian, and there is this incredibly moving scene where he wanders into a playhouse where they are performing Macbeth.
To who?
Everyone's still, around.
Oh, so we're, like, going out and doing social things.
That's what I was saying, is, like, all the country people went into the city, all the city people went into the country. Everyone, we're not masking. We're not isolating. We don't get how that works.
Fair.
And so London is depleted, certainly, unrecognizable. There's grass growing in the streets, but people are still
Doing things.
because the world's ending.
What else is there to do?
But in terms of, one man's hubris dooming everyone,
I mean, wild.
I don't think Macbeth is anything resembling an accidental choice on Shelley's part.
She knows when to put something right on the nose.
I'm going to read a kind of longish passage here because this just got me. This is rough, but beautiful. So he walks into the theater and he's talking about how, like, for this brief moment, they're all, everyone is allowing themselves to kind of be lost in the play. And it says, "A shudder like the swift passing of an electric shock ran through the house when Rossi exclaimed, in answer to, 'Stands Scotland where it did?'
Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself, it cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to smile, where sighs and groans and shrieks that rent the air are made, not marked, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy, the dead man's knell is there scarce asked for who, and good men's lives expire before the flowers in their caps, dying or ere they sicken." Each word struck the sense as our life's passing bell. We feared to look at each other, but bent our gaze on the stage, as if our eyes could fall innocuous on that alone. The person who played the part of Roth suddenly became aware of the dangerous ground he trod. He was an inferior actor, but truth now made him excellent. As he went on to announce to Macduff the slaughter of his family, he was afraid to speak, trembling from apprehension of a burst of grief from the audience, not from his fellow mime. Each word was drawn out with difficulty. Real anguish painted his features. His eyes were now lifted in sudden horror, now fixed in dread upon the ground. This show of terror increased ours. We gasped with him. Each neck was stretched out. Each face changed with the actor's changes. At length, while Macduff, who, attending to his part, was unobservant of the high-wrought sympathy of the house, cried with well-acted passion, "All my pretty ones! Did you say all? Oh, hell-kite, all? What? All my pretty chickens and their dam at one fell swoop!"
A pang of tameless grief wrenched every heart. A burst of despair was echoed from every lip. I had entered into the universal feeling. I had been absorbed by the terrors. I re-echoed the cry of Macduff, and then rushed out, as from a hell of torture, to find calm in the free air and the silent street.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Watching Macbeth at the end of the world is an image I am
Haunted by now.
not going to lose quickly.
No. But truly that, like, collective feeling.
I can't imagine. I mean, I can, but I can't, but I can.
Yeah. I think in some ways, I actually feel like, well, this is not plague related, that in some ways I feel that sort of collective moment or like collective experience in like 9/11.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things that everyone had a moment of like collective horror, even if you were not all in the same place, obviously. Real dark, grim stuff.
Yeah.
Very.
But also this is like, it's dark, it's brutal, but it's beautiful, right? Like Shelley is reminding us of the value, even if it is painful, of deriving a certain catharsis from art, even as the world is coming asunder.
Yeah.
He's overcome with emotion, but it's not a bad thing necessarily, especially because these are men, and these are men of a certain era, and they are not. Lionel struggles to emote, to feel these things as deeply as he would like to, in a way, because he's stuck with this kind of masculine understanding of how he's supposed to like conduct himself.
All of it seems very stuck.
Yes.
This whole like cycle of like winter it dies down, summer it comes back. Like there is a madness in not being able to ever make any progress or change your situation.
Yes.
And it sounds like this is like I'm on a hamster wheel of doom.
And that is
Title
sort
of the episode.
The peak, the hamster wheel of doom. Yes.
Hamster wheel of doom.
And that is more or less the peak and moral of the story of Volume 2, with a quick aside where the Irish invade.
Now that I can get behind. Retribution for the future famine, past famine. Future past famine. 4 episodes, if anyone's keeping track.
The Irish invade and go nuts for a while and are just like,
okay, I don't.
They're kind of like they're like attacking people they perceive as landlords, and
I'm not mad at that. I am like, wait, how is it that there's enough Irish to be doing this when it seems like everyone else is so depleted?
Well, it's
Or of stronger stock.
Well, it's happening slowly though, because like the thing is,
or is this just like invading is like 3 dudes at a time walking the streets, beating people up?
It's large bands of Irish people, but it's important to remember, as we lived through, you can lose statistically horrific numbers of people to disease and still have a surprising, like, it takes a long time to thoroughly deplete a population through illness. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure.
Like, there is death and carnage everywhere.
This is 2090.
Yes.
She doesn't know the potato famine is going to happen, but as we all listeners of this podcast know, that the famine, the population of Ireland pre-famine, and the population of Ireland today, still not.
I want to be clear. Mary Shelley is not mad at the Irish for invading.
Oh,
now,
good.
The Irish invade and are ultimately talked down by Adrian, because this is when things are getting, we are now starting to actually run out of people. This is getting really bad. And so the Irish invade in part to give Shelley, through Adrian, the opportunity to kind of cement that, like, this is the time to lay down our arms and to treat each other as fellow men of a diminishing race.
Right. Do we want to spend the last days on Earth at war with each other?
Yes. This is, and Adrian succeeds.
And cements Adrian as the peacekeeper and the rightful person to have always been in this role.
Yep. So Adrian talks the Irish down, and the Irish are brought in with loving hearts. They are clutched to our bosoms.
Brethren.
They become part of. Also, some Americans at some point invade. They're taken on too. It's very funny. Just a few bands of people show up on England's shores to be like, "What up? I heard it was slightly less bad here than everywhere else."
So is that also what we're to take, is that like out of the world, or at least like the world is that England is bad off, but significantly better off than anywhere else?
Yes.
Okay. Because of that good English superiority. Can't help ourselves.
That is More or less.
Volume 2 ends with Adrian quelling the Irish rebellion.
We quell the Irish rebellion, and Adrian appeals to the sort of better angels of everyone's nature. And I'd kind of forgotten that, like, one man dies, and as he's dying, like, Adrian drops to his knees, picks him up, and is like, how, let me find it really quick. He was a man, and he is dead. Oh, quickly bind up the wounds of the fallen. Let not one die. Let not one more soul escape through your merciless gashes, to relate before the throne of God the tale of fratricide. Bind up their wounds, restore them to their friends. Cast away the hearts of tigers that burn in your breasts. Throw down those tools of cruelty and hate. In this pause of exterminating destiny, let each man be brother, guardian, and stay to the other. Away with those blood-stained arms, and hasten, some of you, to bind up these wounds.
There's just no time to be killing each other.
And there's no point.
We're all gonna die. Is that something that's like, is everyone in the foregone conclusion that it's like just a matter of time and not that there is like a situation where they conquer this in some way?
For the second half of Volume 2, what you have is people who are kind of veering wildly between hope and despair.
Okay.
From moment to moment. That's kind of the centrality of a lot of these conflicts, right? Ryland at first thinks that he's going to be able to, like, get things done, and then he loses his head. And then, the Irish come in with rage, and then they're brought around to hope again. Like,
sure.
This is the sensation of watching the world end season by season very slowly when it's
Hamster Wheel of Doom.
Hamster Wheel of Doom, which is so slow and so gradual that it's almost worse. It feels like there's nothing to be done. And so we band together, we last few remaining residents of the British Isles, shall we say. We close Volume 2 on the conclusion that after several years now of this cycle of winter and summer and winter and summer, that what it makes the most sense to do is to leave England for the continent and to try and find somewhere with better, more conducive weather, essentially, to survival. Because as far as they know, continental Europe has been completely depopulated. And that if they are going to await the end of the world together, they might as well do it somewhere where it rains less.
Wow. That's a lot coming from a British person.
It's the most English conclusion I can think of. It's like, England, my heart, my home, I shall never forget thee. But I'm going to go somewhere where it doesn't rain quite so fucking much.
Where I see the sun occasionally. Vitamin D might be the cure.
And that's, a little quick and dirty, but that's Volume 2.
Okay.
What do we think?
I don't know. We made some pretty big leaps. There's a lot of content in there.
We doomed the world together.
Yeah, we did. I'm very interested for Volume 3 now.
Yeah.
The, nerd in me is also, I understand why she did go into detail about the plague, but there's also the 9th grade biology student in me who had to read The Hot Zone by Michael Crichton. Is anyone else scarred by their reading of The Hot Zone and the very vivid description of what would happen to you?
I think it is a mistake to get too hung up on the idea of this plague as any kind of real disease, because this is...
No, and I don't think that. It's just
this is biblical plague. This is the book of Revelations. This is a plague wrought by God, maybe, kind of. It's not...
If not punishment for the choices of man.
And what's interesting is that she takes kind of pains to point out that other diseases are still happening. There are outbreaks of typhus and cholera and scarlet fever that are making everything that much worse and that much harder. And
I
then
had
there
that
is
as a
this
child.
scarlet fever.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah.
Old world diseases.
What's up? Cough blood into a hanky somewhere.
And Shelley had survived plague outbreaks.
Sure.
She had dealt with actual outbreaks of actual plague.
Do they quantify at the end of Volume 2 what we're talking about? How diminished are we?
They get more into the numbers in Volume 3.
Okay.
But I think by the time they are leaving England at the beginning of Volume 3, we're talking thousands of people.
Okay.
not many thousands,
Okay.
like a few thousands.
Okay. Like 3 boats worth.
Something like that.
4
yeah.
boats worth. Okay.
We are running out of humans at a rapid clip. And, you know, again, if you ever...
And nothing is good for humans like a really long, drawn-out boat ride.
I mean, they're just crossing the English Channel. It doesn't take that long.
That's true.
They're not crossing the Atlantic.
That's true.
You're being America-centric in the back of your mind without realizing it.
Probably.
They're not coming here.
I've taken the shuttle. I know how long it takes.
I want to take a moment and point out that Shelley's writing, her understanding of tension, her understanding of horror, and how to create a scene that is horrifying is impeccable. There are all of these little vignettes in this book that would not be very effective if I just retold them to you, and are not hugely important to the story except insofar as it's just like, oh, the plague is continuing to make things worse. But there are all of these little scenes as things get worse and worse and worse that could be torn straight out of a horror movie. People falling in a cornfield and realizing another person's face is a few inches away from them, and like going into a house that you think is empty and it's full of corpses. This bitch would have thrived in Hollywood.
I'm telling you. I also think, you know, she made the right choice in that this description of like the slowest possible death is everyone's worst nightmare.
Oh yeah, hang on, I want to find it really quick. There's a scene where Lionel encounters one of the first people to die around Windsor of the plague, and he goes into this man's cottage alone because he is hoping he's not too late and that the man is still alive, and he's like, I don't want this, I don't want him to die alone. And listen, this indeed was the plague. I raised his rigid limbs. I marked the distortion of his face and the stony eyes lost to perception. As I was thus occupied, chill horror congealed my blood, making my flesh quiver and my hair stand on end. Half insanely, I spoke to the dead. So the plague killed you, I muttered. How came this? Was the coming painful? You look as if the enemy had tortured before he murdered you.
Yeah, chilling.
Just, whew, spooky.
So spooky.
Happy almost spooky season.
I mean, we're on the precipice.
Spooky season has already started at my house.
My whole life is spooky season. I live in a perpetual spooky season.
But that's volume 2.
I'm here for it.
The
downfall of man.
Yay! It's coming one of these days.
We've got fire. We've got plague. We've got famine. We've got war. They're all here.
We have until 2092.
Is that the year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which seems pretty realistic at this point.
Oh, hopefully we did.
All right. Well, any final thoughts before we close today?
Nope. Just I'm looking forward to the end of things of this book.
All right. Well, Maddie.
Yes.
Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for leading me on this dark and depressing journey.
Yay!
Hooray! We're doing it.
When I decided to cover this book, dear listeners, I texted Maddie and said something along the lines of like, I know that you are the person I know who is most likely to be able to make a funny haha out of one of the most upsetting books I've ever read. And she went, I got you, babe.
Yep. That's what I'm here for. Turn that personal trauma into humor. Fuels us.
Yay! Well, thank all of you for being here with us as we process our trauma into humor. We will be back next week with the thrilling conclusion of Mary Shelley's The Last Man. I promise that not all of our episodes will be 2 and 3 parters forever. Halloween spooky season will be all cute little one-off snippets.
Little short babes, little
Yeah.
short bits.
Little ghosty short stories. And until then, as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author because they could really, really use the love.
Bye.
Bye. Didn't Read It was created, written, recorded, and edited by me, Grace Todd. You can follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at didntreadit.
Our theme song is Books, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton.
For sources cited and a full list of episodes, you can visit us at didntreaditpod.com.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review. It makes a big difference, and we appreciate it immensely.
If you did not enjoy the show, we are accepting applications for a full-time nemesis at didntreaditpod@gmail.com. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia, and to Pesca Trio Publishing.